From former insane asylums whose refurbished halls are purportedly roamed by chilling ghostly manifestations after dark, to deceptively serene state parks where the restless spirits of those murdered within long ago still lurk. It's no secret that Ohio is already a pretty weird and wacky place. Are you sure you're ready to brave our third list of picks for some of its most haunted locations? Number 5. Molly Stark Park. Located off of Columbus Road Northeast out of Louisville, Ohio, lies former tuberculosis hospital turned public expanse and historical landmark Molly Stark Park, whose iconic centerpiece is actually the ruins of the former Molly Stark Sanatorium. Historically, on August 23rd of 1929, the Molly Stark Sanatorium would open its doors to patients. It would derive its moniker after the wife of General John Stark, for whom Stark County is named, and it would be purposed in the treatment of all those suffering from tuberculosis and select other contagious diseases. In 1938, the Works Progress Administration would install nearly 1,200 feet of utility tunnels to sanatorium grounds in order to ease with transport through difficult weather conditions. In 1952, substantial additions to both the east and west wings were welcomed in the name of harboring more patients, and in 1956, the site would be re-established as the Molly Stark Hospital instead, and would begin dabbling in the treatment of other medical cases. Notably, by 1970, the last of the hospital's TB patients had left. In 1995, the site would be forced to cease operations, and the whole of the campus would be left abandoned until 2009, when it was acquired under Stark Parks, who would subsequently reopen the grounds to the public. Molly Stark Park remains open into the present, offering a slew of walking paths, picnic sites, and more. However, notably, due to safety concerns, the hospital itself is still closed down, though plans for its imminent redevelopment are apparently underway. Classically, the whole of this aged place of healing is rumored to be haunted by the souls of all those lost on sight, and even by some whose lives were irrevocably changed within. And those few who have gained entry to the hospital, as well as those simply exploring parklands, have reported a range of inexplicable happenings, including disembodied voices and footsteps, orbs of light that flit through the skies, and encounters with the entities of patients, or even sightings of their pale faces gazing from various windows. Across park grounds, pets have been known to seemingly react to unseen forces, and many describe the feelings of always being watched, of being followed, or even of being tapped or pushed by an invisible presence. While inside the structure, tales tell of furniture moving around on its own, of the sounds of squeaking bed springs emanating from empty rooms, and of encounters with both shadowy figures and with the entities of doctors, nurses, patients, and visitors from eras since gone. Lastly, the prominent spectral figure of a man in a nicer brown suit that's believed to be either a former doctor of great significance or an administrator of some sort has been observed strolling between rooms, checking on patients that haven't been there for a long time. Number 4. Malabar Farm State Park. Located off of Bromfield Road within Richland County, out of Lucas, Ohio, lies Malabar Farm State Park, a popular and renowned public expanse that formerly played home to Pulitzer Prize-winning author Louis Bromfield. Historically, in 1938, Malabar Farm lands would be purchased from one Clement Herring by Bromfield, who would proceed to then buy several adjacent farms as well, which, all in all, would total in at around 1,000 acres of land, and countless historic structures. In 1939, Lewis and his family would move into what was recognized as the Fleming House while their big house was completed. Incidentally, construction of this big house would utilize the freestanding Herring House as its centerpiece, and in total, the project would consume around 18 months before its completion. Subsequently, Bromfield would remain in his cherished estate until his passing in 1956, after which, in 1958, his children would give the farm, the big house, and all associated content to a conservation foundation, who would in turn transform the farm into a museum. More recently, in 1972, the aged farm was transferred to the state, and in 1976, it was opened to the public as a state park, with the mansion maintained for tours, events, and more. In the present, Malabar Farm State Park remains open to the public, offering touring options of the big house and outbuildings, a full visitor center, a mess of hiking trails, farm animals, and much, much more. Ghostly activity experienced through this state park is believed to stem quite simply from the spirits of former residents, owners, and the like that are believed following their earthly deaths to have returned to the landscape they loved and were most familiar with in life. And those frequenting park grounds have reported orbs and strange mists captured in photography and video, extreme cold patches felt in adverse weather, and encounters with both shadowy figures and with full-bodied apparitions in clothing spanning the eras. Several informal investigations of the area have yielded high EMF levels, chilling EVPs, and hits on thermal equipment, while others have told of objects moving on their own, of disembodied voices and footsteps detected from vacant spaces, and of the constant feelings of being watched, of being followed, or even of being brushed up against by someone or something unseen. By far the most famous Malabar story intertwines with actual history to tell of the Seeley Rose House, which, through the 19th century, acted as home to 23-year-old Seeley Rose, a mentally handicapped girl who, in 1896, murdered her parents and brother by poisoning their food with arsenic. Following this tragedy, Seeley was arrested but was found not guilty on the grounds of insanity, and would end up instead spending the rest of her life in an asylum, where she died in 1934. Today, the Rose family home is open for tours, and many tell the spirits of old Seeley and of her victims might still linger. Incidentally, an entity bearing her likeness has been observed outside of the home, and appears so real that parkgoers often suspect her an actress before watching her fade into nothingness before their very eyes. Number 3. The Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Stretched between both Greene and Montgomery counties, just to the east of Dayton, Ohio, lies the iconic Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which also acts as a census-designated place, and that, acting as a leader in military aviation development ranging from the famed Wright brothers up into today's more modern aerospace endeavors, is easily recognized as one of the largest and most significant U.S. AFBs around. Historically, from 1904 to 1905, aircraft operations were tested on lands now holding part of Wright-Patterson under brothers Wilbur and Orville Wright, who would utilize an 84-acre tract of Huffman Prairie for the experimentation and test flights of their Wright Flyer 3, which was, as the name would suggest, the third iteration of powered aircraft they designed. Roots for the Air Force Base itself would be planted through both May and November of 1917, in the form of the establishment of the Wilbur Wright Field first and later of McCook Field respectively, as World War I installations under the Aviation Section U.S. Signal Corps. Initially, McCook Field would be used as a testing field for private aerial experimentation, while Wright Field would stand as a full-fledged flying field, toting the Fairfield Aviation General Supply Depot with an armorer's school and temporary storage depot. Subsequently, through October of 1927, McCook's functions would be transferred to Wright following its closure. In 1931, a portion of Wright was redesignated as Patterson Field, and in 1948, Wright-Patterson AFB was established through a merger of the two separate fields, after which, over its many years, the base would welcome a slew of modernizations and expansions and would continue to grow. In the present, Wright-Pat, as the site is now colloquially called, acts as headquarters to the Air Force Materiel Command, one of the major branches of command of the Air Force as an entity, and also hosts the USAF Medical Center, the Air Force Institute of Tech, and the National Museum of the United States Air Force, which is open daily to visitors and actually offers tours of significant points. Chillingly, the whole of AFB grounds have long played host to a series of local legends and ghost stories perpetuated by generations of both personnel and visitors, claiming the expanse haunted by spirits tied to its past and to its many artifacts, and those frequenting Wright-Pat have reported a range of inexplicable activity, including disembodied voices detected from vacant spaces and over open radios, phantom footsteps that emanate through empty halls, ghostly voices and eerie laughter, a bloodstain that keeps reappearing in an area known as the Hop-Along, and encounters with both shadowy figures and with a range of apparitions in clothing spanning the ages. The Arnold House, Building 70, and Building 219 are all rumored to harbor especially active presences. Inside of the Arnold House, which was constructed in 1841 and is actually the oldest building on base, many have told of objects moving on their own, of odd noises heard from within the walls, and of run-ins with an ominous smoky mass, while in Building 70, the specter of an old woman is commonly observed wandering about, and in Building 19, an ethereal little boy has been known to play hide-and-seek with visitors. Lastly, the National Museum of the United States Air Force is believed to harbor its own slew of entities tied to various planes and helicopters preserved within, including the spirit of a young Vietnamese boy who it said was killed by one of the choppers present, and whose small ghost has both been sighted and even captured on security footage, and also the specter of a Nazi pilot who has been viewed waving from the window of the aircraft he died on. Number 2. The Ridges. Located off of Ridges Circle out of Athens, Ohio, lies the Ridges, a historic mental hospital campus that today hosts facilities of Ohio University, but that originally operated as the infamous Athens Lunatic Asylum, which specialized in lobotomies amongst other torturous procedures. Historically, in 1868, ground for the hospital was first broken, and by 1874, the Athens Lunatic Asylum would open for operations. Within only 2 years of its establishment, the facility would be re-established as the Athens Hospital for the Insane, and during the hospital's years in service, it would treat a variety of patients, ranging from Civil War vets to children to violent criminals suffering from various disabilities. By the 1950s, however, the public would begin questioning procedures like electroshock therapies and lobotomies. Through the latter half of the 20th century, asylum conditions would decline rapidly, and in 1993, the site would close its doors, with its last patients being transferred to the newer Appalachian Behavioral Healthcare Facility. Subsequently, following the hospital's closure, the site would be acquired under Ohio University, and would be repurposed and transformed into the Ridges that we know today. In the present, the Ridges remain open and in use, housing the Kennedy Museum of Art, an auditorium, offices, classrooms, storage facilities, and, according to legend, its fair share of supernatural activity tied to its rather dark past, with those frequenting its bounds today reporting a range of paranormal happenings, including doors that open and close by themselves, disembodied voices and footsteps detected from vacant spaces, and extreme hot and cold spots felt within temperature-controlled rooms or in adverse weather conditions. Several informal investigations of the expanse have yielded high EMF fluctuations, chilling EVPs, and hits on communicative devices. A perturbing phantom in a long black coat has been known to startle those using the men's room, and across the site's 3 cemeteries, which tote a total of around 1,930 interments, most of which that are only marked by numbers, both shadowy manifestations and strange lights have been spied lurking after dark. Also reported through the Ridges and confined to no area in particular are objects moving on their own, the unnerving feelings of being watched, of being followed, or of being touched by someone or something unseen, and encounters with misty entities that glide gracefully about. One more famous hospital legend intertwines with actual history to tell of a disturbing incident that transpired through 1978. And really, when we say this one's disturbing, if your kids are in the room or if you're squeamish in any way, you may want to skip the next 20 seconds or so. On December 1st of the aforementioned year, the Athens Lunatic Asylum would make headlines following the disappearance of a patient, Margaret Schilling, who literally seemingly vanished from her ward. While employees diligently attempted to search the entire property, they missed one place: the top floor of Building 20, where her decomposing corpse was discovered 42 days after by a random caretaker. Further autopsy would reveal that she'd likely died of cardiac arrest all alone up there, but this is where things get a little gross. When her body was moved, it had decomposed so much due to lying in direct sunlight through adjacent windows that poor Margaret had semi-melded to the ground. And following a team, and we can't believe we're using this word to describe any action involving a human body, literally peeling her off of the floor, a noticeable stain had saturated itself in her stead. According to staff, no matter what's been tried to remove the imprint of Ms. Schilling, it remains to this very day, and an apparition bearing Margaret's likeness is often sighted gazing from various windows of Building 20. Number 1. The Moonville Tunnel. Located off of Hope Moonville Road out of Vinton County in Ohio lies the remnants of a ghost town turned dark tourist attraction that's barely preserved portions being its cemetery, several foundations, and most iconically its abandoned railroad tunnel serve as conduits for a range of terrifying local legends. Historically, through the mid-1800s, the Marietta and Cincinnati Railroad would forge its way through southeastern Ohio to reach the latter city of its moniker, being Cincinnati, and placed right along this route was the small community of Moonville, which was at the time essentially comprised of two families, the Coes and the Fergusons. Subsequently, the railroad would establish two trestles across Raccoon Creek and would gouge a tunnel out of a particularly high hill that they dubbed the Moonville Tunnel. With transport to and from the area established, the community would blossom and eventually it would fill up with coal miners working the nearby Hope Furnace. By the turn of the 20th century, however, coal mining through the region would slow significantly, resulting in a slew of closures. By 1947, the last of Moonville's families would vacate town, and by the 1960s, most of the former populace's buildings were gone, with little aside from aforementioned assets to signify Moonville ever existed in the first place. In June of 1985, Moonville's rail line would be reduced to secondary status, with its last scheduled freight train passing through the former community in August. And while trains would continue to run through the area periodically for a time, eventually the route was officially abandoned, and in 1988, all of its rails were pulled up. The area of Moonville Tunnel remains open and accessible to the public, with an old roadbed running through the tunnel itself, and currently, and rather excitingly, plans targeted at establishing a formal Moonville rail trail are underway, with 6.5 miles of trail already opened, and 9.5 miles and 12 bridges to go. Not dissimilar to other railroad-related locations we've covered in the past, the whole of the Moonville Tunnel is believed to be haunted by a slew of presences tied to both the ex-community and to the rail line itself, which some believe, much like currents, is capable of carrying presences across great distances. And those braving the site, especially after dark, have reported orbs of light that flit about, strange patches of fog or mist that descend upon the area alone, odd malfunctions in electronics, EVPs captured in video recordings and phone calls, and the bellowing sounds of phantom train whistles. Back in the day, both walking and working on the tracks were considered incredibly dangerous, with the trestles and tunnels further increasing fatality rates, and in total, around 21 documented deaths transpired right near Moonville, leading to 4 separate prominent legends, being those of the engineer, of the brakeman, of the lavender lady, and of the bully. The story of the engineer tells of Theodore Lawhead, who acted as, you guessed it, a chief engineer to the Marietta and Cincinnati Railroad Company, and who was killed when his train collided with another in 1880. Following Lawhead's passing, visitors to the area would begin reporting sightings of his form at night, carrying with it a lantern and wandering along the tracks near the tunnel. The story of the brakeman tells of a young drunken man working aboard a train, and again you probably already guessed this next part as a brakeman, who one night consumed way too much liquor, passed out on the tracks, and was later run over and killed. Similar to that of the engineer, the phantom of the brakeman has been spied stumbling along the tracks, and disturbingly, has also been known to manifest as scattered remains, terrifying those nearby for moments before fading away. The legend of the Lavender Lady tells of Mary Shea, who was killed on the tracks near the far end of the tunnel, and whose elderly spirit has been known to appear along the trail and then disappear, leaving the strong and unmistakable scent of lavenders in her wake. Finally, the tale of the bully tells of former Moonville resident Baldy Keaton, who was a heavy drinker and who liked to stir up trouble whenever he partook. One night, it's told Baldy picked a fight with the wrong group of men who managed to kick him out, and that later, his body was discovered on the tracks with many suspecting he'd been murdered, but no one ever charged. Now, it's told the spirit of Baldy the Bully likes to manifest above the tunnel, stalking the living while throwing pebbles and even larger rocks uncomfortably close. Taking its fascinating and surprisingly dark history into account, and coupling it with such a formidable range of associated ghost stories and reports of encounters with the unknown, we felt the Moonville Tunnel was a perfect choice as this list's most haunted place in Ohio. Thanks for tuning in for our third list of picks for some of the most haunted places in Ohio. If you enjoyed hearing our histories and tales of terror, subscribe to our channel, like this upload, and share us with anyone you feel could use a good scare. We'll catch you all next time.